Alexis Agapon Glover, 13. Hypothermia drowning. Reactive attachment disorder. Mother claimed she had autism and sickle cell anemia. Julian Adams Lacas, 6 months, head injury, bilateral cleft lip and palate. Sean Maloney, 46. Blunt trauma, burns, alcohol poisoning, depression. Betty Erickson, 81. Gunshot, Alzheimer's disease. Jeremy Fraser, 9. Died from leukemia. Autism, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Pamela Hall, 59. Stabbed, spinal cord injury. Shiley Thomas, 9. Starvation, quadriplegia. Cynthia Burns, 58. Pneumonia, paralysis due to stroke. Sharon Neal Lips, 62. Drowning, chronic pain, depression, and sciatica. D'Amber Miles, 5. Drowning, cerebral palsy. Mia Widener, 10. Head injury, cerebral palsy. Giovanni Kopystensky, 5. Gunshot, autism. Giovanni was playful and mischievous, a great swimmer who loved Thomas the Tank Engine and McDonald's chicken nuggets. Peter Eitzen, 16. Stabbed, intellectual disability. Camden Fry, 8. Positional asphyxia, ADHD, anxiety. When Camden struggled because she didn't want a bath, her mother restrained her and eventually strangled her with pressure on her chest and hands on her neck and mouth. Asher Basher, 4. Drowning, cerebral palsy, and autism. David Roberts, 49. Suspicious death, mental and physical disabilities. Phyllis Fish, 88. Gunshot, stroke, recent cancer diagnosis, and dementia. Jeremy Bostick, 11. Carbon monoxide poisoning, autism. Walter Hildebrand Jr., 20. Fatal seizure, autism and epilepsy. Marie Nicole Rainville, 71. Gunshot stroke. Kelsey Moore, 13. Carbon monoxide poisoning, Angelman syndrome. Jimmy Phillips, 76, gunshot, paraplegic. Willie Henderson, 60, gunshot, blind and mobility impaired. Willie's godson shot him in the back of the head. In court, he claimed that it had been self-defense, even though there were no signs of a struggle. Ajit Singh, 12, multiple organ failure, autism. Loretta Miller, 57, traumatic injury, legally blind and disabled. Leslie Lawson, 39, starvation, cerebral palsy. Leslie liked playing the harmonica and wheelchair dancing. He competed in the Special Olympics. Amanda Crook, 32, traumatic injury, unspecified, on disability pension. Amanda had an orange and white cat named Maxie. She had a tattoo on her hand that read Mom. Elizabeth Knowles, 48, smoke inhalation, chronic illness and mobility impairment, wheelchair user. Rita Morales, Emmanuel Wise. Wait. Yeah. Manuel was 85 and a double amputee. Rita was 87 and an elderly disabled. Traumatic injury. Glenn Freeney, 11 years old, strangled, autism. Peyton Ettinger, 4 years old, starvation, brain injury. Rylan Rochester, 6 months, smothered. Had no disability, but Rylan's mother believed he was autistic. Charles Portner, 7, dehydration, cerebral palsy, developmental delay, and epilepsy. Diane Stewart, 47, suffocation, epilepsy. Wendy Garland, 33 years, pending autopsy, Down syndrome and cerebral palsy. Louis Lockett, 73, gunshot, cancer. Zane Actor, and for all. Zane was 5 and had autism. Farrell was 2 and had developmental delay. Her mother thought she also had autism. Cause of death, strangled. Julian White. 46. Sepsis, severe arthritis. Jeffrey Bishop. 53. Asphyxia, unknown, was receiving disability checks. Tia McShane. Died sometime in 2006. About 7. Unsolved cerebral palsy. Emily Mullen. 85. Traumatic injury, Alzheimer's disease. Marcella Brett Pierce. 4 years old. Drug poisoning, blunt impact injuries, and malnutrition. Medically fragile due to prematurity. Tayshawn Young. 3 years old. Blunt force trauma, autism. He liked dancing to his favorite TV shows and music. Zara Baker. 10 years old. Homicide undetermined. Leg amputee, hearing impairment, cancer survivor. In the 9 months before Zara was reported missing, multiple reports of abuse came into Child Protective Services. Her mother took her out of school to homeschool her. Elisa Baker, stepmother, pled guilty to murder, sentenced to 18 years, sentence extended for 10 years on drug charges. Chase Ogden. 13. Gunshot autism. Carl Potts. 9. Gunshot autism. Alan Heath. 47 years old, stabbing, mobility impaired. Christopher John Elliott, friend, live-in caregiver, convicted of murder, sentenced to 14 years to life. Ella Gandhi, 62 years old, stabbed, schizophrenia. Clara Laird, 86, gunshot, dementia. Marcus Hill, 4 years old, head injury, special needs. Try 11. Ivana Van Haverbeek. Never mind. Sunera Ali. 16. Hypoxia, cerebral palsy. Prosecutors allege Sayonara's mother had actually smothered Sayonara with a pillow and staged the home invasion to cover up the crime. But after 13 years and 2 trials, a judge acquitted Sayonara's mother because he stated the crime could not be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. No trace of any intruders were ever found. Renee Vera, 38. Traumatic injury, cerebral palsy. Brandy Alden, 2 years old, morphine poisoning and fire, Wolff-Hirschhorn syndrome. Cassie Hopkins, 3 years old, drowning, Angelman syndrome. Christopher Hopkins, father, reckless injury to a child, 15 years. Christina Holmes, 22, dehydration, fetal alcohol syndrome. Christina wanted to go to college. Patrick Clare, 35, depressant overdose, autism-like developmental disability and epilepsy. Ruth Pine, 51, traumatic injury, bipolar disorder. Romana Bones, 13 years old, sepsis, intellectual disability. Joseph Conant and Nakuma. Joseph was 11 and had autism. Nakuma was 33 and was mentally disabled. They both died from multiple murder. Nakuma was extremely talented in art and could draw anything anyone asked him to draw. He was working on a post-apocalyptic novel. Isabella Leiper, or Leiper, I don't know, 9 years old, internal bleeding from abdominal injury, cerebral palsy. Alejandra Molina, 7 months, heat stroke and dehydration, prematurity, and special dietary needs. Christina Sneary, 14 years old, gunshot, developmentally disabled. Barbara Robbins, 70 years old, dehydration and choking, intellectual disability, and stroke. Tanera Warwick Davis, 2 years old, head injury, both legs. Evan Watkins, 4 years old, head injury, developmental delay, possible autism. Dana Turner, 31, stabbed and strangled, bipolar disorder. She was stabbed and strangled to death by her boyfriend. Cordero Weber Jr., 5 months, fatal abuse. No disability diagnosed. His parents claimed he was autistic. 7-year-old girl and 6-year-old boy. Cause of death, murder-suicide. They both had autism. Nalesia Hines, 4 years old, smothered and stabbed, Down syndrome. Joseph Adams, 5 years old, vinegar poisoning, Hirschsprung's disease, and colectomy. Joseph was born in Hangzhou, China, and was an international adoptee. Logan Sherwin, 2 years old, brain injury, developmental disability. Gloria Martin, 55 years old, stabbed, blindness. Thomas Hayden, 62, gunshot likely, body not found, ALS. Nubia Verhona, 10 years old, blunt trauma, congenital adrenal hyperplasia. Nubia is survived by her twin brother Ivan, who was found in poor condition but recovered. Carl Jones, 37, blunt force abdominal injuries, mobility impaired. Russell Fox, 8 years old, pneumonia, ADHD, developmental delay, and cystic fibrosis. Russell enjoyed playing outside and watching SpongeBob SquarePants. Mazunori Honda, 71, cyanide poisoning, diabetes. Daniel Kirby, 4 years old, drowned, autism. Daniel learned all of the letters of the alphabet when he was 3. Perry Jones, 51, strangled, severely disabled. James Moore, 22, traumatic injury, intellectual disability. James Thompson, 42 years old, starvation and medical neglect, autism and intellectual disability. Alia Rosaveris, 8 years old, ruptured stomach, cerebral palsy. Gertrudis Albert, 82, head injury, chronic illness, elderly, disabled. She had worked as a secretary for the Philippine government and had traveled the world during her lifetime. She enjoyed reading. Tariq Cross, 7 years old, hit by car, autism. Latasha Kendrick, mother, not charged. Stephanie Torres, 2 years old, dehydration and malnutrition, cerebral palsy. Antonio Mendez. 22. Trauma and malnutrition, developmental disability. Ayanda Manisi, 7 years old, strangulation, epilepsy. Shanika Weber, 3 years old, blunt trauma, unspecified. Deborah Crouch, 53 years old, drowning, unspecified wheelchair user and chronic illness. She was the mother of 2 sons. Yolanda Reese Brooks, 40, obesity and unspecified injuries. Injuries from car accident and obesity. Her husband did not keep her clean or care for her. By the time he called the hospital for help, she was already dying. Hillary Milner, 55 years old, chest trauma, injury to heart and lungs, dementia. Isaac Brothers Bartholomew, 8 months, malnutrition, tube fed, and multiple medical problems. David Mueller, 52, smothered, ALS. Lucy Godrew, 53, burning, multiple sclerosis. Lucy's son took out several life insurance policies on his mother, then lit her bed on fire and left her die in the blaze, knowing her mobility impairment would keep her from escaping on her own. When asked why he had done it, he said he needed the money. Melissa Stoddard, 11 years old, asphyxia, autism. 2013. Brendan White, 15 years old, asphyxiation, autism, epilepsy, and bipolar disorder. Linda Ryle-Bell, 46, stabbed, muscular dystrophy. Brianna Robinson, 21 years old, murder, congenital condition causing blindness. Constance Johnson, 76 years old, stabbed, dementia. She was a pastor's wife with 10 grandchildren. Susan Walter, 47, blunt force trauma, intellectual disability. Jamie Lynn Bleakley, 36, head injury and hypothermia, multiple sclerosis. Before she became disabled, she had employed in healthcare. She was a fan of Renegade, NASCAR, and the Yankees. Gerald Lakes, 24 years old, starvation and dehydration, intellectual disability. Isabella Vines, 21 months. Undetermined in the setting of abuse. Developmentally delayed. Removed from a mother, absent any evidence of abuse because her mother is learning disabled. Chi Y Yeon, 5 years old. Methamphetamine poisoning. Down syndrome. Harry Aspley, 23 months. Head injury and shaken baby. Developmental delay and suspected autism. Terry Lynn Dennis, 7 years old. Peritonitis. Spina bifida. Terry Lynn had a warm spirit. She enjoyed playing with her sisters and learning about the Bible. Brian Daniels, 46, gunshot, scars from third-degree burns over 2/3 of his skin. Brian loved to study ancient religious rituals. He bought and sold ancient Egyptian art online. Richard Davenport Jr., 59 years old, blood loss, leg amputee, and used a wheelchair. He was a military veteran who had been in the Marines. Alia Bonham, 2 years old, blunt force trauma, fractured skull, multiple congenital disabilities. John Satanowski, 65 years old, neglect, dementia. Levi Bonner, 7 years old, head injury, intellectual disability. Levi's killers nearly escaped justice by claiming the boy had died from falling off a pogo stick. Alex Bordalakis, 14 years old, stabbed, autism. Amelia Dew, 2 years old, head injury, myotonic dystrophy. Initially, her stepfather was arrested but not charged. 2 years later, doctors who examined Amelia came forward stating that her injuries were highly consistent with shaken baby syndrome. Robert Gouignard Jr., 4 years old, internal bleeding, autism. Mary Swidzersky, 59 years old, gunshot, mentally handicapped. Lola May Stout, 73 years old, heat stroke, goiter, and schizophrenia. Matthew Hafer, 28 years old, prescription drug overdose, autism. Melissa Torres, 32 years old, asphyxia, quadriplegic. Mary Bowers, 83 years old, gunshot, stroke, Alzheimer's, recently moved to assisted living facility. Madison Garcia, 13 months, malnutrition and dehydration, Down syndrome. Edward O'Brien Jr., 92 years old, heart failure, heart condition. Mr. O'Brien was a World War II veteran. Natalie's Rivera, 3 years old, starvation, Down syndrome, visually impaired, unable to walk or talk. Her 2 brothers and 2 sisters survived and were moved to foster homes. Minori Hioki, 75 years old, cyanide poisoning, lung cancer. Tamia Alding, 12 years old, malnutrition and infection, autism and tuberous sclerosis. Tamia always greeted family members with a hug. Lucas Massini, 8 years old, stabbed, severely disabled. Martin Meffert, body found October 24th, 2013. 23, gunshot, unspecified. Stephen Copo Horton, 18 years old, drowning, Angelman syndrome. All Stephen wanted to do was kiss and cuddle everyone, his mother remembers. Damien Goley, 14 years old, asphyxia, autism. Stephanie Owen, 29 years old, blunt trauma, intellectual disability, mobility impairment, and diabetic. Bertha Anderson and Lisa Nave. Wait, never mind. Mickey Liposhock, 52 years old, gunshot, intellectual disability. Michael Sudkamp, 53 years old, blunt trauma, multiple disabilities, health issues. That ends part 3.